The Last Showgirl. This movie is written by Kate Gersten and directed by Gia Coppola. And I forgot to check what's the relation there, Todd? Where does Gia Coppola fit into the whole
Her
the
which
family tree?
her parent is not one of the famous Coppolas, but she's the niece of Roman Coppola, I believe.
Okay. Okay. So somewhere on the tree, but off a little ways.
Right. Yeah. So I think I think I think she's still her grandfather is Francis. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Anyways, so she directs this movie, and this stars a huge cast: Pamela Anderson, uh, Dave Bautista, Kiernan Shipka, who I just watched in Red One. Um, Jamie Lee Curtis pops up. Billie Lourd pops up. Uh, Mrs. Macaulay Culkin herself, Brenda Song, pops up, and for some reason, Jason Schwartzman. That was the weirdest one. That I mean, how many different things can Jason Schwartzman play this year between whatever he did, like being like altar boy in Between Two Temples, to being a flamboyant asshole in Queer, to now being like this tanned, oily, ruthless director of a Vegas show. What? Like, was that
Well, I mean,
supposed to be some sort of reveal? I
it's family. If it's Gia's
Oh,
family.
that's true. It is family.
Well, she in all of her movies, she has like all the nepo babies. Like one of her movies had Maya Hawke, and this one has Jamie Lee Curtis and Billie Lourd and Jason Schwartzman. It's like she likes working with fellow nepo babies.
So he pops up. His voice pops up first, and then later on, you see his face. And when I saw his face, I actually did figure out it was him, which was weird because you really can't figure it out. But when I heard his voice, I'm like, is that Edward Norton? Because it sounded like Edward Norton, but it was Jason Schwartzman. So I didn't even realize Jason Schwartzman and Edward Norton sound alike. This this debate on who that actually was the most fascinating thing about this movie, because I thought this movie was super boring. Um, it is a story about a showgirl in Vegas. She's been a showgirl for 30 years, played by Pamela Anderson, and her show's closing. And what is she going to do moving forward? And it's like the last like classy original showgirl type show on the strip. It's closing, and what's she gonna do? Where's she gonna go? And how messed up has her life been because of how much she's devoted to this show for the last 30 years? It really wants to be like Vegas showgirl version of The Wrestler. Like, that is what it's really trying to be. The difference is The Wrestler has a really, really, really good script and really interesting performances and scenes to go along with what's happening. I think half the movie is just watching Pamela Anderson stare at the strip. Like, she's just staring at Las Vegas for half the movie. And it's like, what, everything feels very staged, which I think it might be kind of part of the point, because she is a stage performer. She doesn't know how to be herself. But it just feels so fake in so many ways. I know she's like, this is like the comeback role, like it was for Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler, and she's like on. We're going to talk about potential Oscar nominee in a little bit here. She got the SAG nomination. Jamie Lee Curtis got a SAG nomination out of this, who is a bright spot that pops out of nowhere. Um, Dave Bautista is also kind of great in whatever he's in. But I don't know. I just couldn't get into this movie. There was, because I just felt there was nothing to get into, and it put her in these situations thinking, oh, maybe this will be interesting, but it wasn't. I struggled really on almost every front. I'm giving it 2 stars because there is something there, but nah, I was bored. I was really bored by this movie. Todd, I have a feeling you probably like this much more than I did.
I mean, a little bit more, but
Okay.
like I do like the cast. It's a fun cast, and they work well
You went and
together.
saw this earlier today, and before you left, you said you knew nothing, and I said the one thing I'll tell you is this cast is loaded.
Yeah. Well, I mean, seeing someone like Kieran and Shipka in this and Brenda Song and them being like peers with Pamela Anderson it's I mean, it's interesting. But
Yeah.
it's the grimy backstage thing reminded me a little bit of like Magic Mike or something like that. I could have seen
Mhm.
it if it leaned into that a little bit more, being something like that. Now, Jamie Lee Curtis is interesting because she has the Allison Janney role. Like, I
Oh
never
yeah.
thought that that would be something that she would go and start taking her roles, but like this is she even has the Allison Janney hair. Like she looks like Allison Janney and sounds like Allison Janney. This was an Allison Janney role for sure. But she steals the scenes that she's in, which aren't that many, but she'd
She's
be
got
more
the best
deserving of it.
scene too. Like her dance is the best scene.
It was a pretty cool scene. But she'd be more deserving of a nomination for this than she was for the one she actually won the Oscar for. But
Absolutely.
it's a very Vegas movie, clearly shot in Vegas. You can feel the Vegas in it, but it's like the ugly part of Vegas, like the part that you don't really go on the strip to during the day even. And
Well,
it's like the
because
female,
it's the old part of Vegas.
right? Well,
It's
and it's
like
like
this
it's
is
like
what Nicolas Cage went to in Leaving Las Vegas when he wasn't drinking.
the whole you're in exactly. The it's the female version of the cooler in a way, which is like it's showcasing that part of Vegas that is almost completely died out to make it more corporate and more safe. Like these things aren't everywhere anymore. Like there, it's just I mean it's kind of doing a little bit of that. And Pam Anderson is kind of perfect for the role. And but she starts out looking like she's gonna be a crazy person. Like I kept thinking like she kind of looked like Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream or something like that. Like she was gonna really go crazy, but it all eventually you see comes from a place of warmth with her, which I don't know. I guess isn't quite as interesting, but I don't know if it's actually a great performance or if it's just a performance that's so true to life that it actually just works. But I could see why she's getting singled out because you know it's one of those roles that you never thought that she would have. I think it's a
And
movie
she's
Zach's
doing
gonna
something
like.
again.
Yes, I think Zach's gonna like it because the idea of the movie is better than the process of actually watching it, which is something that I feel like he is always talking about now, and or he wouldn't admit it like that. But it's also under 90 minutes, which is way too long. Even so, because like there are several scenes that drag on way too long, and they're just like her audition scene. I'm just like, oh, this has got to end. Like, I mean, I know it was so bad, but I mean, but I mean, I feel like it ran out of story after like 50 minutes, which I mean, it probably would have been a really cool short story, and it would have if you would have condensed that into like 40 minutes, it probably would have been great. And it does want to touch on something that the wrestler does, but I think Billie Lourd out of nowhere is like amazing in this movie in like her couple of scenes, but that alone is not good enough to be as heartbreaking as like Evan Rachel Wood and Mickey Rourke are like tearing into each other. So I think the movie's fine. It's ambitious for the type of budget it has, but I couldn't quite get there. I'm at like a I'm essentially in agreement. I'm at like a low 2.5 stars because I did appreciate it and I do love the Vegas of it, but yeah, it is pretty boring.
And I don't want it to sound like I'm comparing it to the wrestler, but there are some similarities there. And I don't want to say, well, the wrestler did this better, and so this is, but it's like this is why the wrestler worked, and this is why this one didn't when it was trying to do something similar, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I made that comparison in my head too when I was watching it, but I mean that's just
Well,
because
it's
you know the
just that,
daughter shows up.
and well, not only that, but just the way it's shot, the griminess of how it's shot, and just the roughness of it, and how you're looking at this public performer, warts and all, um, in the backstage parts, and yeah, and then the weirdest scene, the most awkward scene, is the dinner scene with Pamela Anderson and Dave Bautista. Like that one, I'm like, wait, where did all this come from? Like all of a sudden, like we're gonna
Yeah.
have this one scene where we're gonna air everything out and be like, There was stuff to air out between these guys? What? I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
didn't get any of that even hinted at beforehand. So I mean, yeah,
Nope.
and that was one of those things that was supposed to be a big a big like shocking moment or something when you realize what they're actually talking about, but then you're also just like, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've got a twice approved and we've got a twice declined. So I'm giving The Last Showgirl 2 stars. Todd's giving it 2.5. It's also in theaters. It has a shot at some Oscar nominations, so you can check it out. If you're a Vegas fan, I mean, it is fun to see Vegas. I couldn't figure out where they were. Like, could you figure out where? Like, at one point
No.
we saw Caesars at one point.
Well, the one casino that that Jamie Lee Curtis works at, I mean, I couldn't even. It looked like one of just the old ones. It could have been like the Flamingo or something. It could have been. It could have been any of those in that area. But it was
It
just one
looked
of
like they
those.
were like slightly off strip. I don't think they were
I
on
mean,
the
yeah,
strip.
it looked like an old. It was an old casino. Basically,
Yeah,
it didn't look like anything. The ceilings were too low for it to be anything actually like built in the last like 30 years.
yeah. All right. Well, there we go. That's what we got.